Hey everyone, Sean Williams here with the Williams team at Remax Premier Properties. And we're here today to talk about buying versus renting. And our goal here is just to provide you with some valuable information if you might be renting at the moment and considering buying a home. I think renting does have a negative connotation sometimes, and it's important to note that buying is not for everyone and renting may make sense for you, but we just want to go through some of the myths, that you hear out there about buying a home, along with just giving you some tangible examples that you can look at and consider when you're evaluating the two options. And then last but not least, we want to jump in and just give you the best steps moving forward if and when you do decide that you want to buy a home. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to give a quick intro to everyone. Over here to my left, I have the laughy but never taffy Katie Hunley. Wave to everybody. Right below her, we have the sweet but never sour Stephanie Shacklet.
Hi.
And then last but not least, we have the star that's waiting to burst, Mr. Christopher Adams.
Hey.
You see what I did there, didn't you? All right, so here we are, October 2020, been living in a crazy time, and I know there's a lot of people that are just itching to get their own space, right? And I think this is very applicable because we're seeing a ton of buyers in today's market. But one thing I want to talk about is just those myths that we hear out there. A lot of people that are renting may be hearing that's kind of giving them pause for getting into the marketplace. So, Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you. And I think one of the things that scares people a lot is, look, if I own my own place, I'm paying for when stuff goes wrong, when there's a roof leak, a plumbing leak, an electrical issue, the HVAC goes out. So those are things that really scare people. But maybe you could share what that reality is for people that are currently renting.
Yeah, the reality is you're already paying for it in your rent. You know, most of your savvy landlords are taking a percentage of your monthly rent and setting it aside for when repairs and maintenance come up. So you are paying for it. You're just not the one making the phone call to the repair people or dealing with the repair people or maintenance people. And that also includes the property taxes and insurance, something that, you know, the taxes and insurance you don't think about as often probably, but that's wrapped up in your monthly rent as well. So you're paying for it, you just don't realize it.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like you're paying for it. But the reality is if somebody's renting a home as a landlord, they are in the business to make money. So they've done the math and they have figured out what I can get on rent, but then what I have to get to cover my mortgage, along with anticipated repairs. And of course, they want to build in some profit there as well. So the reality is in some fashion, you are paying for it. You know, it might be 3 to 4 months before a repair is needed. And that landlord has taken that time to collect that money to be ready for those particular situations. So I think that's one thing that people don't realize is it's being built into your rent in one way or another. So myth number 2, I'm going to throw it over to you, Katie. I have to have 20% down to buy a house, right?
No, actually, 20% down is another myth, which is a huge chunk of change that most people just don't have sitting in their savings account, especially for a first-time home buyer. For most loans, the requirement is a minimum of 3%. Of course, you can put more down, but with the interest rates being so low, money being so cheap, a lot of people are putting a little bit less down and conserving that cash. And not to go too much into types of loans, but, you know, there's conventional FHA, those are the 3% requirement to put down. But there's also VA loan and then USDA, which requires 0% down. Another thing that's offered that I've had a lot of first-time home buyers take advantage of is KHC, which is just a down payment assistance program. And right now that's up to $6,000. So just to give you a quick idea, a $200,000 home with 3% down, $6,000. You could use that, you could do KHC if you qualify for it and have another chance if you're an FHA buyer to put 0% down. So lots of options. That's why I always recommend talking to a lender and just getting all your options on the table.
Yeah, I'm always surprised when I talk to people and they're like, but I have to have 20% down. And it's like, well, where did you hear that? And I think that's just kind of a misconception that's out there in the marketplace. Certainly, if you have that to put down, by all means do that. That's going to reduce your monthly payment. But something else I hear about a lot, Katie, is, but then I'm going to have to pay PMI. Can you tell them just a little bit about what PMI is real quick?
Yeah, so PMI is private mortgage insurance. And that's something, if you put 20% down, then that can be waived. But what I've been advising a lot of people is if they don't want to put 20% down, put down less. And then when you get your tax income every year, put a chunk of change just towards the PMI and pay it off quicker.
Yeah, once you get to 20% equity in your property, that PMI drops off. There's typically nothing stopping you from making earlier payments to pay that equity down quicker. So especially if you're anticipating a lump sum of cash coming down the road, whether it's a job or your taxes or whatever it may be. So don't let the PMI scare you, because a lot of times it's only 50 to $100 depending on the price of the home. All right, so that's the 20% down myth. One more myth that I want to hit on real quick, Stephanie, is, but if I buy a house, I'm going to lose my freedom, right? I'm planting roots. That means I'm stuck here.
Yeah.
What say you?
Well, we all know that we don't live in a one-size-fits-all society. And so having the option of renting may make sense for some people. You know, let's say someone is a traveling nurse, or someone is moving to the city to decide, hey, is this the right fit for me? Just kind of exploring on their own to see if they want to move there. You know, it may not make sense for someone to buy a house and then sell it the next year just because of the costs that go into selling. But I think what some of those people may not realize is that, you know, you have some other options after you've lived in a home for a year. You know, after you own your home for a year, most mortgages will allow you to rent it out. So there's an option of you having to go out and move to another city and buy another home as an owner occupant. But the other thing is that, you know, a lot of people don't realize that how much equity you would get versus renting. So the issue there is that you're just kind of giving your money away versus building up equity that you can use later on down the road. And, you know, every year when you do your taxes, you have a mortgage interest write-off. So, you know, you just get to deduct that from your taxes every year. So you do get some more benefits owning a home versus renting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you definitely, you know, if you're going to be there for a year, it may not make sense. We find that a lot of times our clients say, I'm only going to be here for a couple of years. And then before you know it, it's been 3, 4, 5+ years. I have to do the research on this, but last I heard, the average person stays in their home for 5 to 7 years. So if you fall into that category, I can bet my bottom dollar that financially owning a home is going to make more sense than renting. But there's also something to be said for having your own space. Definitely. And then one other thing, like you said, I want to reiterate is you could turn around and rent that house. You don't have to sell it, right, after you move out. So now you get to be the landlord that's making the rent, right? That's kind of a nice option. One thing that you touched on that I want to dig into a little bit deeper that I think is very important is the equity piece of it. So, Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you. Kind of just give the short and dirty definition of what equity is and what those benefits are to equity.
Yeah, the equity is the difference between what your house is worth and what you currently owe on your house. So meaning the property value will go up as you pay down your loan. So you can use this equity or home equity line of credit, or also known as a HELOC, for the future if you want to make repairs, or not repairs, but updates to your home.
So basically what you're saying is, you know, the equity gives you some flexibility and some options that we were just talking about. So theoretically, you know, your home value is going to slowly go up every month and every year. And as you pay down your mortgage, your debt's going to go down. And that gap between the two is your equity. So theoretically, that's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But then you can tap into that equity with the HELOC and do different things, whether it is, like you said, repairs and upgrades to the home. Maybe you want to travel. Maybe you want to buy another property, or like you said, you know, maybe buy some cars or boats or whatever. May not recommend that, but that's actually giving you probably a little bit more flexibility potentially than renting long term. So there's definitely some financial impact there. So let's give something that they can, the folks out there listening can sink their teeth into. Katie, you were talking earlier about the 20% down and how that is a little bit up. Well, it is a myth. You don't have to have 20% down. But for somebody that's looking at buying their first house, I'm going to give you a $200,000 example to work with, because that's not too far off of what our average sales price is in our market of, say, 250. And we see a lot of buyers entering the market around that 100 to say $200,000 price point. So for the folks out there, hey, I'm looking at buying a $200,000 house. How does that break down?
Yeah, so like you said, most first-time home buyers will buy a house between 100 and 200. So we'll use the further end of for the example, but you can get a very nice home for up to 200,000 in Louisville, or Crestwood, Oldham County. But let's take 200,000, you put 3% down, that's $6,000. And that's including your, take it.
No, it's okay. So
okay.
No, you're right on track. So you're $6,000 down. Then what's the amount that you're going to be financing?
So that breaks down to about a little less than $1,200 a month. And that's including your loan, which is your principal and interest, and then plus your taxes and your PMI. So as you all probably know, there's several homes in Louisville being rented for $1,200 plus in Louisville. So why not own for a little less than 200 and get a very nice starter home versus renting at 1,500 plus and having to pay someone else's mortgage?
Absolutely. So you're saying on a $200,000 house, I've got to bring $6,000 down. Obviously, there's closing costs that can be negotiated, and we'll talk about what those closing costs look like, but those can be negotiated for the seller to pay those. So what I'm left with is about a $1,200 a month payment, which includes my principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and PMI. That's everything. And that's important for all you people out there that are using those online mortgage calculators. You got to make sure you're factoring everything in there. But heck, even if my mortgage payment was $100 more than what rent would be for a similar house, I mean, that's pretty nice when you get to own it and you get all those benefits that we were just talking about. So I think that's a great example that we see every single day in our marketplace. So yeah, definitely. We already talked about PMI. So let's just talk about the cost of buying a home. Obviously we've talked about the down payment, but Stephanie, I'm sure there's a whole lot more to it than just a down payment, right?
Of course. One of the things that we like to do is sit our buyers down and give them an estimated breakdown sheet so they can understand what they're spending and where that money is going to. So the first thing that you're spending your money on within the first 72 hours of getting a offer accepted, we will be collecting what's known as an earnest money deposit. And it just shows that you are going to be acting in good faith to get to the closing. Typically, this amount is around 1% of the purchase price, but it really does fluctuate from situation to situation. And something to note is that, yes, you are giving this money up front, but it comes back to you at the closing table and it gets put towards, whether it's your closing costs or your down payment, wherever that money needs to be applied. The second thing that you would be spending money on while you're under contract is for your home inspection. For just the standard home inspection stuff, which is home inspection itself, and then termite and radon, those costs are around $400 to $700 depending on the house and what all needs to be looked at. Anything else could be a little bit more if you had to get more specific. That's just a general amount. After that would be the appraisal. That's around $500. Some lenders do add that into, your closing costs or the amount that you bring to the closing table, just is specific to each lender. And then finally is the actual closing costs themselves. And those are around $5,000 to $6,000. It just depends on, how much the home is and what type of loan you get, because there are some lenders who might bundle that into your actual payment so that you bring no money down. And then, of course, your down payment is the other thing to factor in. But the cost itself minus the down payment, you're kind of looking at $6,000, $7,000 that you need to have to spend on buying the house itself.
Yep, and that's outside of the down payment. So call it $6,000. That's $12,000. Well, that's a whole lot more than what we were just talking about a minute ago. But remember, number one, everything's negotiable. You could potentially get the seller to pay for half or all of your closing costs. But then when it comes time to inspection, like, how often do you all see when you spend $500, a buyer spends $500 on a home inspection, and then you negotiate $3,000 worth of repairs? And it's like, well, holy cow, that was a good investment of my money. Not only do I know what I'm buying and I know that it's sound and safe, but I was able to recoup some of that money on the back end from the seller. So a lot of times that can actually be a huge benefit there, and just really give you that peace of mind. So it's money really well spent there. So with that being said, let's try to wrap this thing up real quick. We're going to go rapid fire here. We've talked about kind of what those costs are associated, and I've been sitting on the fence. I've been thinking about buying, and now I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm ready to pull that trigger. Chris, what's the first step that I should do if I want to stop renting and buy a home?
First step, and I can't stress it enough, is get pre-approved. It sounds scary, but it's really not. It's a couple of clicks of your mouse on your computer and about 15 minutes worth of work. And then this will give you a general idea of what your monthly payment will be and what you can really afford. But the lender can get you pre-approved, and after you submit it, in typically less than an hour, as long as depends on how busy they are and your relationship with the lender. But it's not a scary process. It's quick. It's easy. I just recommend doing it.
Yeah, it's not as daunting as what some people think. And, like you said, you want to get a full financial snapshot on what your monthly payment looks like, what your closing costs look like, because everything that we've talked about up to this point is a little bit of an estimation. So you get that full picture, and you're well equipped when you submit an offer. We can send that pre-approval in, and it's just going to make your offer look that much more serious to the seller when they're considering potentially multiple offers. So yeah, that's definitely the first step. The second step, Katie, what would you recommend?
So I think as agents, it's important for us to, if we have the time in today's market, to actually sit down with our buyers and find out what their wants and their needs are, so that we can connect this with their pre-approval and set expectations so that we can find them the right home that's going to make them happy and something that they're going to love.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, having that conversation about what that game plan looks like is so uber important, because buyers just get excited and they just want to say, I want to go look at homes. And trust me, home shopping is a lot of fun, but you really got to just spend that 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour sitting down with an agent and just getting on the same page before you do anything else. And then last but not least, Stephanie, one thing that I think gets overlooked a lot, especially with a lot of agents, is what you're going to talk about. What would you recommend in terms of setting expectations with clients?
Well, it's really important to go over the things that Katie and Chris were just talking about with a potential buyer, because it also ties into us explaining what benefits you get from working with us, and just what your expectations are and what our expectations are of you, because this is a relationship that we need to establish and explain how the process is going to work up front, so that everyone is happy and that things run smoothly throughout looking at houses, getting under contract, and getting to the closing. Because there's a lot of moving pieces, and if you aren't aware of those up front, it might be a little bit confusing along the way.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that buying a house can be stressful at times. But obviously our goal here is to make it as enjoyable and as fun as possible. So what you're talking about allows us just to really set those expectations for each other as what this working relationship looks like. And it's very important for us. I'm going to be very transparent about it. We have multiple clients that we work with, and our goal is to serve our clients in such a way that they want to give our name out to other people. Like, we make no bones about it. So when we have that ability to sit down and talk through that whole process, like Katie was saying, and setting those expectations, it only makes for a more enjoyable experience. And in turn, hopefully you would feel more comfortable and confident referring us out to other people. So that's, those are some great talking points. Hopefully you as a listener, if you're watching this up to this point, you have gained something valuable. You have gained some knowledge and some insight. You still may not be ready to buy a home up to this point, but it's hopefully something to consider. So like I said, buying is not for everyone. If renting makes sense for you, then by all means rent. But when that time comes, we certainly hope, when that time comes to buy, we would certainly hope that you would give us a consideration, and we would certainly love to work with you and take care of you and help you with your first house purchase, because it sure is an exciting and fun time. So anyone have anything else to add? All right, so we're going to wrap it up, and hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. See ya.